What if the quietest voice could shape the loudest storm? What if a single hand, unseen, could change the fate of giants? Two nations stood across oceans, trading words like weapons. Tariffs rose. Fear spread. Markets trembled. The world waited, holding its breath. And yet, in the shadows, a change began. A whisper. A gesture. A hope. Factories froze. Machines grew silent. Shipping ports overflowed with containers that could not move. Markets shook. Prices jumped. Businesses faltered. On distant farms, families stared at fields they had tended for generations. Crops withered. Tools rusted. Futures were uncertain. Workers walked the streets, searching for opportunities that had vanished. Cafes emptied. Shops closed. Communities quieted. Leaders met in glass towers. They debated numbers, tariffs, and policies. Words were sharp. Solutions felt impossible. And yet life continued. Children ran through dusty streets. Rivers flowed. Birds crossed skies that seemed heavier with tension than ever. Something fragile held the world together, even as the giants trembled. People suffered. People waited. But behind the headlines, something moved. Something unseen. Then, from the margins, a figure emerged. Not on television. Not in front-page news. Quiet. Observant. Patient. This person saw threads no one else could see, threads connecting nations, markets, and people. They imagined a bridge. A bridge not made of steel, but of trust. They imagined seeds. Seeds not just in soil, but in hearts and minds. They imagined water. Not just flowing in rivers, but flowing between nations, carrying hope, ideas, connection. They did not see themselves as a hero. They were a weaver, stitching a torn world together. They imagined a future where tension could become dialogue, fear could become cooperation, and silence could become trust. This was a vision of something greater than power. Something deeper than control. A vision of possibility. The weapon was simple. Almost invisible. A handshake. A signed contract in a quiet office. A promise whispered to someone willing to believe it. No headlines. No applause. Yet this small act carried the weight of change. Like water wearing stones. Like a seed breaking through concrete. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. The world did not notice. But the currents had shifted. One gesture became a bridge. One act became a flow of possibility. And that flow reached the fields, the cities, the factories, and the hearts of the people. It was not easy. Every step forward met resistance. Every promise faced doubt. The figure traveled far. Crossed cities, countrysides, oceans. Met leaders who refused to listen. Farmers who feared the next drought. Workers whose hands had grown calloused from waiting. Youth whose dreams had dimmed. They listened. Adjusted. Persisted. Each handshake, each promise, each seed planted became a victory. Bridges grew between people. Ideas flowed like rivers. Farmers started to see their harvests reach markets again. Factories hummed. Streets regained energy. Youth felt opportunity in the air. Markets breathed cautiously. Leaders began to speak with hope. The impossible began to bend toward the possible. On farms, a mother lifted a basket of freshly harvested crops. Her eyes were bright. Her hands, once tired and cracked, held life. She whispered to her children, "We have hope again." In the cities, a young engineer sketched designs for machinery that would help local factories. He looked at his friends and said, "We can rebuild." Across oceans, leaders shook hands quietly, agreements forming that would have seemed impossible months ago. And through all of it, one truth became clear: transformation requires patience, courage, and persistence. Like water flowing, like seed sprouting, change cannot be rushed, it must be nurtured. On the outskirts of a sun-scorched town, farmers stared at cracked soil. The drought had lingered, the markets had failed them, and their futures seemed uncertain. Yet small acts of courage began to reach them. A contract promised new buyers. A delivery truck waited to carry their goods. Prices reflected the value of their labor. Water flowed again through the canals. Seeds, once stored in fear, were planted in fertile ground. Neighbors came together. Youth lent energy. Tools, once abandoned, were polished. The fields began to breathe again. The harvest returned. Families gathered around wells. They shared meals. They shared stories. Pride returned. Hope returned. It was not a miracle. It was persistence. It was a connection. It was small acts creating enormous ripples. In cities weighed down by uncertainty, youth felt the pressure like a storm pressing on their shoulders. Jobs had vanished. Schools had closed. Futures seemed locked. But hope came quietly. Scholarships opened. Workshops gave hands tools to build. Grants provided opportunities to dream. The youth became bridges themselves. They connected communities, shared knowledge, and learned to create solutions. One whispered to another, "We can fix this. We can build something new." And for the first time, the future was not something to fear, it was something to shape. At the national level, leaders watched the thaw unfold. They spoke of tariffs, policies, and negotiations. But the real shift came in the margins. The quiet figure had created conditions that no decree could force. Markets stabilized. Supply chains reopened. Factories hummed. Economies began to move again. Leaders found room to breathe. Negotiations became real, not performative. And slowly, the world began to understand that power does not always roar. Sometimes, it whispers. Sometimes, the quietest hand has the greatest impact. Factories reopened. Goods moved. Streets filled with energy again. Farmers harvested. Markets reflected their labor. Youth pursued opportunity. Communities felt pride again. Hope returned like sunlight breaking after a storm. Leaders celebrated quietly, but the true hero remained unseen. The world had shifted. Giants softened. And one quiet hand had been at the heart of it. Water flowed in rivers once dry. Seeds grew in fields and mines. Bridges connected people who had never met. Books passed from hand to hand, carrying knowledge and inspiration. Every object, every act, every gesture became a symbol of hope, connection, and possibility. Great change does not always roar. Sometimes, it whispers. Sometimes, it flows quietly through unseen channels. Sometimes, the smallest hand can carry the weight of nations. The quietest voice can move the largest storm, and in its shadow, the world finds hope.